Oh, it's official. Recording is in progress. So thank you all so much for joining us this morning. So as I believe you know, we are here to talk about some potential changes to trash and recycling. My name is Rachel Zerwin. I'm the Community Programs Director for HC3, and that's the High Country Conservation Center. You might have seen our green shirts at the Frisco Barbecue, Keystone Bluegrass and Beer. Yes, we do a lot of recycling, and our work goes way beyond that. So we also focus heavily on climate action. We help people get solar panels on their rooftops. We help residents get behind the wheel of an electric vehicle. We save water in local homes, and we offer a lot of the same services for the business community. And the program ResourceWise actually offers sustainable business assessments for free in most Summit County communities. So that's one to check out if you haven't yet. But a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into this recycling and composting, recycling discussion. HC3's executive director is Jennifer Schenk, and she's going to present for about 25 minutes. We're going to get into the details of this new potential recycling program and what it means for local businesses. After that, we're going to open to questions and answers. So please use the Q&A feature on your Zoom to submit those questions. And then after that, like I said, after the presentation, we'll get into the questions. Submit those again through the Q&A. And if we can't get to all the questions, which we will try to do, you can email us at info@highcountryconservation.org and we will get back to you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jen Schenk, who's going to talk to you a little bit about these new programs.
Hi, everyone. As Rachel said, I'm Jen Schenk. I'm the Executive Director of HC3. And I'm really looking forward to this morning. I'm so sorry that we cannot do this in person. We would much rather be doing this with you all and have much more of a dialogue and a discussion. We are going to go through, of course, all the proposed changes, but I just want to emphasize how much we want your input. So hope we can get into a lot of Q&A with you guys, and that'll be the majority of our session this morning. Like Rachel said, if we don't get to it, use that info@email, give us a call, let me know if there are other formats or forums, like other groups you are involved in, where we can come present potentially in person or on Zoom, and help get the word out about this program so that we can engage as many businesses, HOAs, and property managers in this proposed program as possible. So I actually want to start out on a high level here and talk about why we are doing this program. And so I think for those of us who have lived in Summit County for a long time, we're certainly already seeing the impacts of climate change here in Summit County. We're seeing shorter winters. It's often not snowing until later than it used to. And more importantly, we're seeing a lot of very early spring runoff. So on average, we're seeing spring melt down about 3 weeks earlier than we did just 30 years ago. And because of that, there's less water in the Colorado River. I think we've all seen those terrifying pictures of Lake Powell and Lake Mead, which honestly are not that far downstream of us on the Colorado River. And then finally, everyone knows that we're seeing a lot more wildfires. Last summer, our skies in Summit County were smoky the majority this summer, and there weren't even that many fires that were local to us. Most of those fires were on the West Coast. And so it's really scary to think what may happen if we start to see more fires in Colorado next summer and in future summers. And of course, the tragic December fire down in Boulder County really drove home to me personally what's going on with our forests and this dry climate that we're in right now. The good news is we have a goal in Summit County, and that's not just an HC3 goal, but it's a community-wide goal created by a group called the Climate Action Collaborative, which is local governments, ski areas, lots of large and small businesses. I think many of you are on this Zoom today, but we have this goal to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 80% by the year 2050. And so in case you're wondering what this actually means as it relates to waste reduction, you may be interested to know that 10%, it's actually 9%, so almost 10% of our greenhouse gas emissions actually come from waste in Summit County. And that 9% comes from materials breaking down in the landfill. So specifically organic materials like yard waste, slash, and food waste, they create methane. And I'm sure you know methane is a greenhouse gas. You may not know methane is 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And so again, putting waste in the landfill is certainly creating greenhouse gas emissions. And we need to obviously work to curb climate change locally. So okay, so then again, digging down a little bit more into waste reduction, our community-wide goal on waste diversion is to double our recycling rate to 40% by the year 2035, which is coming right up. Currently, we're only at about 20% in Summit County, which sadly means that about 80% of the waste that we use in our homes and at our businesses is going straight into the landfill. So another thing you may not know is that our landfill is slated to close in 2056. And even though that seems like it's a little ways away, it's just over 30 years. And so we need to do everything we can to preserve that space in the landfill. It's incredibly difficult to build new landfills and get them permitted these days with environmental regulations. And really, is that something we want in Summit County, to just keep expanding our landfill, even if we can in 2056? So the more we keep out of the landfill, the more life we're going to have in that landfill. And hopefully we can extend the life of the landfill in Summit County far beyond 2056. I do also want to mention, in case you're wondering, why we're kind of stagnant at that 20% diversion number, recycling rate number, because we do have a lot of new programs in place from Strong Future funding. Strong Future is that ballot initiative that was passed just a few years ago in 2018, and it's a property tax that generates over $1.6 million annually for recycling. And so with that funding, Summit County government and HC3 have worked together to implement numerous programs, including building a new drop site down in Silverthorne, putting food scrap collection for free at all the drop sites and a couple community locations, adding glass stations throughout the community for residents, adding mattress collection, carton collection, and then also creating a really robust and comprehensive marketing and outreach plan for the community, just to educate the public and businesses on ways that they can recycle properly and better. So we do think over time, once those programs mature, we think we'll edge up a little bit above that 20%, but we know that those voluntary programs and education and outreach, we know from other communities across the country, those programs tend to only drive diversion percentages up a few points. So we think we'll get above 20% in a few years with all the new programs. However, we know that without overlaying some policy and the programs we're going to talk about today, that we will not be able to get to the 40%. So that's why we're here and talking about these programs. So now I want to talk a little bit about which program applies to you. I know that there may be a couple different types of homeowners association representatives on the line today. So for those of you guys who have business or dumpster service at your business or homeowners association, property management company, obviously that looks something like this, then that is going to be the focus of today's webinar. And that program that will apply to you is called Universal Recycling. So again, that universal recycling will apply to all commercial entities. So businesses, institutions like government, schools, hospitals, that kind of thing, as well as homeowners associations with residential units that share dumpsters. In terms of individual bin service, if you have service like this, probably some of you do at your house, but we're not going to focus on you as individual residents today, since this is meant for commercial entities. But if this was what your house looks like, or if you are a homeowners association who manages a neighborhood and everyone has individual bins like this one right here, then you would be classified in what our waste providers like Waste Management or Timberline Disposal, they would call you a commercial group account. And that, if this is your homeowners association situation, everybody has these individual bins, then this program, Pay As You Throw, will actually apply to your homeowners association. So if that's the situation you find yourselves in, I would say either watch the residential forum, because that's focused on the pay-as-you-throw program. There's one already recorded and posted on our website because we did one last week, or you can attend a live webinar tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on January 20th. So we're not going to get into a lot of detail on that unless we find through the Q&A and chat that a lot of you are in that category of homeowners associations who manage these group accounts with individual bins. So I want you to know that this is not a brand new and unique program that we're just experimenting with in Summit County. These programs are very well proven. In fact, across the US, there are over 7,500 communities who have pay-as-you-throw and also universal recycling in place. In Colorado, I tried to pick a handful of examples, mostly in the mountains, to make it more applicable and, you know, to sort of share some relevance to the situation we face in Summit County. And so you can see the ones that are bolded on your screen are the ones that have this universal recycling in place. So you can see Aspen, Pitkin County, Vail, Boulder, and Fort Collins. And then everyone on this list has pay-as-you-throw in place. And so the ones that are bolded have both pay-as-you-throw and universal recycling in place. And of note is this little stat over here about the town of Vail. So the town of Vail actually doubled their recycling rate when they implemented these programs back in 2014. And they doubled their recycling rate in very short order, in about 18 months. In terms of all these other communities, where they sit with their diversion rate is right around 35 to 38% diversion. And again, we're shooting for 40% in Summit County. So we do believe by implementing these new programs, along with all the stuff we're already doing and strong future programs, we feel like we are very easily going to hit that 40% goal in Summit County by getting these programs going. Oh, got a little ahead of myself. Okay, so now jumping into the details for universal recycling. So the concept with universal recycling, as the name implies, is that we want to make sure everyone in Summit County has access to recycling. We get so many phone calls from long-term full-time residents, as well as second homeowners, people who are visiting saying, hey, I'm staying in this condo or I'm staying in this hotel in Breck, and I can't find recycling. How do I find recycling? And unfortunately now the only thing that we can tell them at HE3 is, hey, if you're really passionate and an avid recycler, you can drive it over to the nearest recycling free drop site. But I think we all know that's not feasible for everyone. It's not feasible for all full-time residents. And it's certainly also not feasible for someone who flew into Summit County who may not even have a car to drive over to the recycling site. So what does this mean for you as a business? It means that if you have trash service, recycling collection service will now be required. It also means that if you have a liquor license as a business, that glass recycling will be required on site. And then I do want to emphasize that this will not change your choices of waste and recycling service collection providers. So if you are working with Waste Management or Timberline Disposal or Summit Roll-Offs right now, you will continue to work with the same company that you're working with right now. We don't anticipate any changes in those private companies offering the services. And the Summit County government and none of the local towns have any intention of taking on waste collection or recycling collection services in Summit County. So again, you'll have the same choices you do now. In fact, if you're a business who's on the line and you have trash service and you have recycling, you are probably good to go. You may not have a whole lot to do to come into compliance with the new program when we roll it out. So a couple more details. Oh, and I want to back up just quickly about the liquor license glass collection. Hopefully that makes sense to you all. And I know there'll be some questions about that, but the reason for the glass collection being required if you have a liquor license is those are the businesses that we have identified as being businesses that tend to produce a lot of glass. So if that's a restaurant, even if it's back of house, glass collection behind the bar, there's still a lot of glass generated and a huge opportunity to recycle glass. And the waste service providers do offer glass collection. The two that offer it right now are Timberline Disposal and Summit Roll-Offs offer individual recycling glass collection. And I am not sure what Waste Management's going to do, but I'm hoping that they will also offer it too. So jumping into the slide that's on our screen now, in terms of if you are a business who has those public facing common areas or a homeowners association with common areas, recycling containers will now be required next to any trash container. And again, we are trying to increase recycling in Summit County and show our leadership as a community for anyone who's visiting here, or a local resident who comes into your business. The nice picture on your screen is over at Cool River, and they're doing a fantastic job. So they are probably good to go already. And then again, the glass containers, if your business has a liquor license. And again, this is only if you serve, if this is only in a front of house type situation where the public is. So if you're a restaurant and you don't have a single trash can front of house, then these rules up here don't apply to you. These are only rules that apply if the public is accessing the area and you already have trash cans out. In terms of a couple other considerations on our slide here, hotels and lodges are going to be required to have in-room recycling. I know some hotels and lodges do, but unfortunately, many do not. So we're not talking about individually owned condo units. That's not something that can be required. But if it is a hotel, and we have a definition for that, then it's going to be required. Of course, we will be providing training to tenants, employees, and janitorial staff as we start to roll out this program. In terms of, okay, there's a lot on this slide, but I wanted to get into some of the details before we get into Q&A. So there is going to be a recycling volume requirement for businesses, homeowners associations, all of you on this call that have dumpster service for your trash. So recycling is going to need to equal 50% of your trash dumpster capacity. And the reason for that is simply because it doesn't make sense if a homeowners association has, an 8-yard dumpster for trash, and then they're going to put out like a tiny little individual bin or a 5-gallon bucket, so to speak, for recycling. That's not what we're going for here. We're trying to make meaningful changes to recycling and get to that 40% diversion number in Summit County. And so I'm going to give you an example that's on the screen. So if you're a business and you have a 6-yard dumpster for trash and it's picked up twice a week, then that makes your trash total volume, potential volume, 12 cubic yards. What that means is that on the recycling side, you're going to have to get to the 50%, you're going to have 6 cubic yards total. And I just wrote one way that you could get there. It doesn't really matter exactly how you get there, but this is just one option. You could have 4 cubic yard cardboard dumpster, if you're a retail shop or a restaurant that uses a lot of cardboard, with weekly service. So that's the 4 yards. And then you could also have two of those individual carts, which happen to be 96 gallons or a half of a cubic yard. You could have 2 of those for single stream, and that would get you to the 6 cubic yards. So that would get you to the 50% volume. I know some of you are wondering, like, hey, what type of recycling do I have to do at my business or homeowners association? Like, does it have to be glass? Does it have to be cardboard, single stream? And that is something where we definitely want to give you all the flexibility to come up with the materials that you're generating on site that'll get you to that 50% number right here to achieve that goal and the requirement. So it's going to be up to you. Again, glass collection will only be required at businesses with liquor licenses, but we absolutely hope that homeowners associations that have multifamily units will also add glass collection if possible, because we know there's a huge demand for glass collection or glass recycling, I should say, in Summit County. And it would be nice for those residents to not have to drive to drop sites if possible. Sorry, I'm trying to click my slide. There we go. So in terms of single stream recycling, since again, that's one of the options to meet these requirements, cardboard recycling, single stream recycling, and glass recycling would be the three biggest types of recycling. So I just want to mention that there are not going to be any changes to single stream recycling guidelines. We're not going to get into details about single stream guidelines. I'm going to go through them very briefly right now. But if you have any questions about that, my colleague Lisa is going to post a link to our website that gives you lots of detail about what can and cannot be recycled in single stream. But just know that there are not going to be any changes in the guidelines with this brand new program. So in terms of single stream recycling, I think you all know glass is excluded in Summit County. There are a number of glass locations for residents, not so much for businesses, but just on the residential side, we have about 9 or 10 glass stations in addition to the drop sites that are located throughout Summit County. There's several in Breckenridge, there's some in Summit Cove, Dillon Valley. So just know, if you weren't aware of those on the residential side, that those are out there. And then in terms of what's accepted in the single stream, I think this is actually a really nice sign. And we actually have these to give out to businesses who participate in our program through Strong Future funding. But yeah, I mean, paper and cardboard, if you don't have a lot of cardboard, can go in the single stream. Metal cans, plastic bottles, and a couple other types of plastic too, like plastic tubs. What cannot, there are no cartons allowed in single stream recycling. That's something we get questions about. So no like milk cartons in there. And that's that one. And then I want to bring you back up a little bit before we get to the Q&A. I have just a couple more slides, but I want to let you all know that this is not a process that's being driven exclusively by HC3. There is a group that you may not have heard of unless you happen to be on this task force, but we have a group called the Zero Waste Task Force in Summit County that has been around for more than 10 years. And this is a group that advises Summit County government, who runs all the recycling programs, as well as HC3, on ways that we can increase waste diversion in Summit County. And so this group, and you can see on the slide, but I do specifically want to mention a few of the folks on here. So every single town on your screen is participating. There's a staff member and an elected official from each of these towns and Summit County government. The trash and recycling collection providers, specifically Waste Management, Timberline Disposal, Summit Roll-Offs, and Summit VIP are all participating on the task force. HC3, every single one of the ski areas, a number of large and small businesses, including lodging, a restaurant representative, and a property management company. And then we do also have residents participating. And I know several, I looked at the list of participants today. Several of the Zero Waste Task Force members are on the phone today, specifically those who are representing some of these businesses that I just mentioned. So they are driving the decisions, and all of the recommendations that I just mentioned a few minutes ago came from this group, not just from HC3 or Summit County government. My slides do not want to go. There we go. So in terms of a timeline, HC3 did receive a grant earlier in 2021, last summer, from the state of Colorado to begin work on this process. We did hire a consultant who Rachel briefly introduced to you earlier. Her name is Lori Batchelder Adams. Her company is LBA and Associates, and she'll be answering some of the questions later, but she has substantial expertise in launching these programs, not only across Colorado, but working across the entire country on waste diversion and pay-as-you-throw programs. So we started the stakeholder process with the Zero Waste Task Force back in September. We have had 3 meetings with that big group. Like I said, you saw the folks who were listed. There are actually about 35 people in those meetings. We are obviously right now, we are in this public input phase, which is what we're doing today, and with the residential forums. Here we are in spring 2022, which is coming right up. So in terms of how these programs will get implemented, these programs will be implemented, or I should say considered, by each town and Summit County government individually. So in other words, if you are a resident in Silver Shekel, which is unincorporated Summit County, then the Board of County Commissioners will be making a decision on whether to formalize these programs and move forward. And if Board of County Commissioners approves these programs, pay as you throw and universal recycling, then that will then apply to any residents in unincorporated Summit County. If, on the other hand, you live in Silverthorne, you're a Silverthorne resident, then Silverthorne Town Council will be making the decision on whether this program applies to you. The feedback we have gotten from the waste service providers like Waste Management and Timberline, as well as residents and businesses, is that it's really important to have consistency. And that's why we're working on this across the entire community. And we certainly hope that this program is going to move forward across all the towns and Summit County, unincorporated Summit County, so that there's not confusion. So like if you're a resident of Breck, but your business is in Silverthorne, it would just be pretty confusing for each of the waste service providers to have to offer a different service to, your business in Silverthorne versus a business in Breck. And you get the idea. So we're super hopeful that all of the towns will support this program, but please understand this is not an HC3 decision, and it's up to each town council and Board of County Commissioners to move this forward. So hopefully if the program does move forward, we'll be in this summer period. Obviously, we'll be doing a lot of outreach and planning. And in early 2023 is when we are proposing that the program begins. And we are proposing for this business component, the universal recycling component, to have an 18 to 24 month rollout period. And again, like I just said, in terms of the program rollout, the idea is that we will phase in starting in early 2023. We recognize that there is a lot from a business and homeowners association standpoint. I know that questions about space and your enclosures are going to come up, and I understand you all are probably already starting to budget, if you haven't already, for 2023. And so those businesses that can come into compliance quickly, we're hoping to get 50% of all businesses and HOAs to be able to comply with the program in the first 12 months. And then the next 12 months, for those of you who, have some hardships or some things you need to work through, we're hoping to get you all compliant by the second year. And know that HC3 or your local towns will have staff that are going to come out and provide technical assistance to businesses and HOAs. So what we'll plan to do, assuming the program gets approved and that we can get some funding from local governments or Strong Future, then we will actually be coming out and doing walkthroughs of sites. So if this is your dumpster enclosure, we'll take a walk through there. We'll look at what you have. We'll try to find you ways to save space. We'll figure out if you need to expand your dumpster enclosure, or if the town where your enclosure is will let you put a 96-gallon toter outside the enclosure. I think some will and some won't. We don't know that yet, but we will come out and we will walk you through this process. We also anticipate that there will be a waiver process for businesses and HOAs that either need more time than the 2 years or that truly can't come into compliance. I know there will be a handful of unique, situations where you just absolutely don't have space. So if we come out and there's not a solution, maybe there's a waiver to this program. But again, I think I want to be hesitant. I don't work for a local government, but I can tell you, going through the stakeholder process, all the local governments really, really want to support you all as businesses, and the residential side too, which we're not getting into today, but we want to make sure that we are supporting you to make this program as easy as possible. And we know that it's going to take some time, but we're here to help. Again, we're going to do some resident education on pay as you throw. And I already talked about the support, even though it's a little bit generic. I just want you all to know that it's really important to us. And that's why we're looking for your questions today. And we can talk a little bit more about ways that other communities have supported businesses throughout rollouts that are similar to what we're proposing in Summit. And speaking of input, we're almost to the Q&A. But we do have a survey that's live on our website. You can take a picture of this with your phone right now, QR code. Please fill out the survey by February 6th. My colleague Lisa Evans is also posting a link in the chat right now to the survey. So please spread the word. If anyone misses this forum today, again, it will be posted on our website starting tomorrow. So have them watch the forum and then take the survey just to give us input on it's basically just a few questions of like, what do you like? What can we, what do you think are the benefits? What are your concerns? And then what can we do to help you implement this program? Like, what are the things that we, HC3 and local government, can be doing? And with that, I'd also love to hear some of that today in the Q&A, and we will address some of your answers. Thanks,
Awesome.
Rachel.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jen. Really good to see. We've had a lot of questions coming through about like what help is going to be available to businesses. So really great to hear about all that support. So for the folks on the line, I just want to mention that we do have some local experts here to help answer your questions. One is Hillary Suioka from the town of Frisco. We have Jesse Burley from the town of Breckenridge. We have Bill Shank, recycling foreman at the Scrap, which is the Summit County Resource Allocation Park, where all our trash and recycling goes. We also have Michael Wurzel from Summit County Government. And as Jen mentioned, we have Lori Batchelder Adams, who is our waste consultant and has helped numerous mountain resort communities like ours with universal recycling and other programs. So with that, I am going to start off our Q&A actually with a little definition. So I heard Jen talking a little bit about enclosures. Maybe you saw in the presentation some of those sheds that were built around the dumpsters. That's an enclosure. So if you think about a dumpster enclosure or in a shed, if you're wondering what an enclosure is, that's what it is. It's that shed that goes around the dumpster, because I've seen some of those questions coming through. So with that in mind, on that note, we're going to call out Jesse Burley first. And this one was specific to the town of Breckenridge, but I have a feeling based on the Q&A that folks around the county have this question. So Jen, feel free to chime in after. All right, so Jesse, space is an issue for us. Can we place recycling outside of our dumpster shed? Or alternatively, is the town willing to help us if we have to expand our dumpster shed to add recycling?
Thanks, Rachel, for that question. And we recognize that, the town's requirements to enclose trash has a multitude of different goals around why we ask businesses and frankly, multifamily units to do that. So I think the town is in a position to try and understand what space constraints are out there. We have, dueling parking goals, for example, and screening goals and wildlife protection goals. And so recycling, while it doesn't have as much of the wildlife hazard components to it, currently is required to be screened just like trash. And so in moving forward, we would really like to hear, I think, from businesses more about what exactly those space constraints are so that we can properly budget some potential assistance for businesses and multifamily units to either expand those or change regulations around allowing for recycling to go outside. But I would say we don't have an answer for that yet. It's definitely a consideration, and it's one of those hardships that we're looking at providing waivers for as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jesse. Great perspective from the town of Breckenridge. And Jen, do you have any comment just as far as the other towns on supporting businesses with those enclosures and the changes?
No, I think what I've heard from the other towns, again, is just very, everyone is very interested in supporting businesses. So I think each town will end up being a little bit different since each town has different rules for enclosures and whether or not they allow, most of the towns do not allow like an extra trash bin outside of the enclosure. But in terms of whether they will, once this program starts, it's hard to say. And sorry, I got sidetracked answering questions, and I saw some questions related to that. So I don't think we have those specific answers. But yeah, very similar to Breckenridge. Every single town wants to help businesses and HOAs, and we will figure out a way to do that.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, I think that answers a lot of those questions actually that came up through in the Q&A. So we're going to just switch gears for a minute. And Bill, we have a couple folks asking questions about the scrap. And I think the first question is, if this is going to double our recycling, does Summit County even have the ability or the capacity to accept the increase in recycling?
Good morning. Thank you. Yes is the answer. As many of you may or may not know, our original material, small material recovery facility here at the landfill that came online in 2006 was never originally designed to be able to handle single stream altogether recycling and our source separated material from our public no fee drop off centers. So what we've been able to do is get budgeted approved through strong future funding, the ability to build a separate single stream cold storage processing facility to separate these two operations to handle that material. And in addition to that, we have also been able to replace the existing baler from 2006 in our material recovery facility here on site. And that happened in December of last year. So we're very happy about that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. That's good news. That's really good news. And while we have you, we do actually have, just on the scrap and operations, we do have one more question that I would love to have you answer. And this is on the sale of, on recycling sales. Does Summit County make money, break even, pay someone to haul away the recyclables, or do you just put the recycling into our trash?
The answer is A, B, and C. It depends on what materials. Definitely not D. None of that material goes into the trash. But depending on what the material is, some we have a higher return, some have a break even return, and some of them you have to pay to recycle from.
I'm sorry.
Awesome. Thank you. I think a good answer for folks, and nice reassurance that that stuff is definitely not going into the landfill. So thank you. So again, switching gears, perhaps this one for Jen. We have a question just about glass, maybe the wrong material ending up in the recycling bin. And is it true that bins that have like single stream recycling bins that have glass in them will not be picked up? Is that correct?
I think it depends on the amount of glass, because glass, as you know, so in the waste industry, we call, when there's a material in the recycling bin that should not be in there, we call that contamination. And so if we have a recycling bin that has glass in it, or it has trash in it, I mean, glass is essentially contamination in the same way that a plastic bag or any non-recyclable material like trash or food would be. So yes, if your waste service company, which we also call those haulers in the waste business. So if your hauler, waste management or timberline comes by and sees that, it is really up to that hauler to make that determination. But it is trash. So if there's a glass bottle or two, I am sure that in general, it's getting picked up, that it's going up to the scrap, that it's getting recycled. But I know also sometimes what happens up at the scrap at the recycling center is that if those loads come in and they have a massive amount of contamination, which does not happen very often, honestly, but it does happen. Sometimes that does end up going to the landfill, but it does not happen very often, fortunately.
Awesome. Thank you. And part two of that question is, why is glass not accepted in single stream recycling?
Sure. Great question. And I know it creates issues. So we removed glass from our single stream recycling, I think back in 2015-ish. And the reason for that is because glass, when it's mixed in with single stream, a few things happen. So when it's picked up at the curb in single stream, what happens is your recycling is going into a truck and it's basically getting compacted in the back of the waste management or timberline truck, which means your glass bottle is breaking into little tiny shards that are getting embedded in the paper. and it then gets run through the baler, like the baler that we have at the scrap recycling facility. And first of all, glass going through a baler, it ruins the baling equipment. It puts a lot of wear and tear, and balers need much more repairs when it's going through that. And it ruins the paper and those other soft materials. So when a paper mill starts getting paper with little glass shards embedded, that's not something that they want. And then further, those little tiny glass shards, they often don't end up in the bales. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, get the idea of what a baler is, like a hay bale. But if they're little tiny things, they often end up on the plant floor at the recycling facility and get swept up and put into the trash. And so we decided that we were going to remove glass from single stream for those reasons and start collecting it separately. The great news is our glass all goes down to Miller cores, and we are able to do bottle to bottle recycling, meaning your glass bottle is getting turned into a brand new bottle, which is infinite. Glass is an infinitely recyclable material. There aren't many. Glass and aluminum are the two main ones. But yeah, you may be drinking, if you have a Coors in a bottle, you may be drinking from a bottle that was recycled in Summit County. So it is the best way to go. And for now, and other communities look to us as a model. The downside, and the reason I know you're asking, is it's less convenient, and glass does end up in the trash if they don't have a way to get it to a recycling facility. So I know there's pros and cons, but that's why we have chosen to do it that way in Summit.
Thanks, Jen. And I think we do have those glass stations around the community, and I think there's opportunity to put more of those around the community. So if you all recognize a need for that in a specific neighborhood, please email us, info@highcountryconservation.org, and we'd be happy to work with you to get one of those sited in neighborhoods around the county. So a question I'll throw out either to maybe Jen or Lori, or perhaps one of the towns, I'll let you guys jump in. How will enforcement be handled for universal recycling?
Would you like me to take a crack at that?
That'd be great, Lori, since you have more experience with other communities. Thank you.
Sure. Hey, all, this is Lori. How will enforcement be handled? Well, there's lots of pieces to that. First of all, as Jen explained to you, we're going to take our time rolling out the commercial recycling program over at least 2 years. So some of you may come online early in that period. Some of you may come on more towards the end. Our expectation is that enforcement with penalties and any kind of negative response and enforcement action will be delayed over a period of time, most likely extending beyond the 2-year period, so that there is some compliance monitoring happening, but the response when we find lack of compliance for whatever reason is an oops, hey, did you know? Let us help you, here's information. Our expectation for hard enforcement will be down the road. Once the programs have had a chance to mature, the initial waiver process has been worked through, and all the case-by-case issues have been addressed. That said, however, 2 things. Enforcement will ultimately be decided at the local government level. So Summit County may do something slightly different with their exact timing and the penalties they might impose on other actions than each of the individual towns. That will be a specific decision at the local level. The second thing I'd like to mention is that for the most part, I think I can speak collectively for those of us on the panel in saying that we do believe in enforcement, that hard enforcement will eventually be needed to really bring home the point that this is an important change. No longer do we want recycling to be an afterthought, a voluntary action if we have time, if it's convenient. We want recycling to be a core way of managing our waste, right up there with trash. And if we don't have enforcement that's effective, we won't be creating a level playing field. So if you're a business that works really hard to do what the regulation and the community asks you to do and your neighbor doesn't, not fair. So we want a good, even-handed, practical and reasonable enforcement program, but it might look slightly different in every community.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Lori. And then I think, again, just switching gears, we're going to try to get through everyone's questions. We are going to end promptly at 11 a.m. So I'm going to keep us moving. Has there been any conversation among the haulers about expanding their expanding their services and just the need. We've gotten a few questions in the Q&A about are haulers prepared to take on these increases in recycling? And have there been any conversations among the haulers in the community about this, about the increased need? And when I say hauler, that means waste and recycling provider. So the person who picks up your trash and recycling.
I'd be happy to talk about that. So Lori and I presented to Dillon Town Council last night on this program, and this exact question came up. What I will say is a couple different things. I don't work for the haulers, of course. We have not so far heard the haulers express concerns about expanding services and adding recycling. I know that there is a staffing crunch right now, not only in Summit County, but across the entire country. I do think it's our hope, like Lori said a minute ago, just to reiterate, like our intent is to roll this program out over a couple year period that doesn't start until early 2023. So by the time we have everyone up and running on the business and HOA side, we're really talking about 3 years from now. So I think we are very hopeful, and so are the haulers, that the economic and staffing challenges will have at least somewhat resolved. However, I want to acknowledge that I have seen in your questions today, several of you have said that you have concerns right now with the level of service that you're getting from your hauler. And so Lori, Aaron Byrne, who is the solid waste director for Summit County government. Lori, Aaron, and I are meeting with each of the haulers individually this week and next week. We have also already met with them in the fall individually. But I think this is something that we will just ask them about individually, since they haven't brought it up in the stakeholder meeting, and mention some of your specific concerns that I'm seeing in the Q&A today.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. And another question that came up is illegal dumping. Could you or Lori address, this person's concerns about the potential for illegal dumping, and not just like tourists, but locals and really anyone, now that folks have to pay for their trash a little differently?
Sure. On the commercial side, we often call it dumpster poaching. That's typically what it looks like. People putting their trash in a trash dumpster that doesn't belong to them, who they're not paying service on. And it's an ornery problem to address. But a couple of the ways that we will combat that is in this set of policies that Jen introduced to you. Is we expect to have, a majority of the policy, the onus is actually on the haulers. And what we actually say is, hey, haulers, if you are providing trash service to this multifamily unit property or commercial business, you have to start providing recycling to them as well. On the flip side, we say, hey, commercial business, if you aren't self-hauling already, in which case you'd be exempt. If you have a hauler come to your curb or your alley or your back dock and pick up trash, you must have recycling as well. So as we require everybody to have the service, we expect to see dumpster poaching fade out. In the short term, we may have some issues. And the mechanisms that we have there, of course, are the use of enclosures, which, as we've discussed, again, varies town by town. But there are other mechanisms available, such as locking dumpsters, imperfect solution, because that takes time when everybody uses them. But it also decreases poaching or illegal dumping, and other things such as camera surveillance, that sort of thing. Part of the services that HC3 expects to provide is public education and outreach, awareness, kind of in your face. Did you know we're doing this now? And also some level of compliance monitoring. So watching for things like lack of service, lack of adequate service, or the illegal dumping, whether it's dumpster poaching or materials being left outside of enclosures and hurting the aesthetics and the litter and that sort of thing. So it's a tough problem. And it's especially hard on the commercial side, but one we're really working to build a toolkit to address with multiple options.
Awesome. Thanks, Lori. And on that note, and you kind of talked about enforcement earlier, is there going to be any type of auditing program or fines for not complying, or is that still too far down the road? I mean, you talked about a big window that we're going to have for businesses to comply.
Absolutely, Rachel. As I mentioned, we kind of use the term compliance monitoring, where folks who are familiar with the program will be out in the field, boots on the ground, looking to ensure that on the residential side, the commercial side, our programs are coming into compliance. There are the dumpsters, there is access, they are enclosed, they are properly labeled, those sorts of things. So there should be that level of observation, and initially met with good oops tags, did you know, can we help you? We do expect that the hardcore enforcement, if you will include penalties and maybe other actions that will be determined by the town. Remember, there are two regulated communities, if you will. The haulers will have a responsibility to get the recycling container to you that's at that 50% level and service it for you. But you also will have to make sure, if you have trash service, that you have the recycling service as well. So we expect there will be a penalty schedule for each party when full-blown enforcement comes into play with our mature programs. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Well, I hope it does. If whoever submitted that, if that didn't answer your question, please email us again. That's info@highcountryconservation.org. Say enough times to get it rolling through your head by the end. So I'm going to switch gears again a little bit, and perhaps this will be one maybe for a combination of Jen and Lori. I know it looks like we have a lot of property managers or folks working with HOAs who are working super hard out there and are concerned about trash or maybe the wrong materials ending up in the recycling. So I guess kind of a two-part question. What's the incentive for managers to educate homeowners and tenants to do a good job of recycling?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think the incentive is that community value that we have here in Summit County. And I want to acknowledge, and I've seen your comments. There are several questions related to this. And again, the contamination and the trash that you're seeing in recycling, despite your best efforts. I don't want to speak on her behalf, but one of the questions, and you probably saw my answer if you were checking out the answers, was who is the property management company that's on the Zero Waste Task Force? And that person is Abby Brown, and she works with Woodwinds. And I do want you all to know, as HOA board members and property managers, that Abby is definitely a really strong voice in the room. She supports this program, but she reminds us all the time, as well as the other businesses on the task force, of, oh my gosh, like we are trying so hard. Like sometimes it feels like we're beating our heads against the wall. Like we have a dumpster, we have the trash here, we have recycling here, we're putting up new signage constantly, and yet we still have guests who are visiting, or even long-term residents on occasion, who are putting recycling, who are putting trash into the recycling bins. So I know it's an ongoing issue, but I don't know if there's an incentive per se for a homeowners association. I really want to go back to that community value of, there are a lot of people who live here and who visit here who do care. And I think it's incumbent upon homeowners association, property managers, and HC3 and local governments to all be working together to figure out a way to make this better. And I want to give a couple examples without naming properties, but through Strong Future funding, HC3 has actually received funding to go out and help homeowners associations and businesses get this dialed in. And so it's a microcosm of what's going to be happening as we roll this program out. But my colleague, Allie Flynn, who's on the line with her video off, helping on the back end, She goes out. We have money out there in grants to help homeowners associations add recycling or improve recycling. And we do a walkthrough. We talk about the materials. We talk about the issues. We have signage. We make really nice signs. And I will say there are several of those large properties, multifamily units that have mostly short-term renters who have seen dramatic improvements in their recycling. And so we are here to help you. And it's going to come down to that one-on-one thing. And it will not be perfect, but we hope to make it better for you than it is now.
Thanks, Jen. And I have to say, this group is awesome. The amount of really great ideas that are coming through the question and answers right now is really fantastic. And actually, I did just in the Q&A, you should see Abby Brown offered support just to chat through questions, and her contact was in her contact info is included in that Q&A. So check out that answered question from Abby Brown, and she has her info in there.
And then Rachel, can I just add one more thing quickly?
Absolutely.
In terms of an incentive, I do think as businesses get going with this program, if you're not recycling right now as a homeowners association, you will find over time that you can have a smaller trash bin. And so it is slightly cheaper to have recycling service than trash. But over time, you will be able to decrease the size of your trash dumpster. It won't happen immediately, but you'll start to see more of what's trash now going into your recycling and be able to decrease the size of your dumpster and have that pulled less often, which will ultimately save you money once you get your program up and running.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen. So we got 2 minutes, so I'm going to try to make this a straightforward one. For the folks that have glass recycling, will the glass recycling be included in that 50% volume? So you talked about, recycling must equal 50% of trash. If they also have glass, does that count toward that 50%?
Will you ask that question one more time, please? Sorry, I was texting Lori because she got booted off the presentation.
Oh, welcome back.
I think
Lori.
what you were asking is, does glass count in the 50%?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Fantastic.
It does.
Thank
And again, it's a volume calculation. So whatever types of recycling makes sense for your location just has to be 50% volume of the trash collection that you have on site.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm scrolling through the Q&A now, and it looks like we're about to wrap up. We do have, like I said, some really great ideas coming through the Q&A specifically about short-term rentals. Right now, we have worked with Summit County government and the towns to put recycling guidelines in what's called the Good Neighbor Guidelines for anyone who signs up for a short-term rental license. But still, again, thank you guys so much for the ideas coming through. That about wraps us up for today. So again, if we didn't get to your question, go ahead and email us at info@highcountryconservation.org. And please scan that QR code, take the survey, visit our website, because we'd love those ideas to keep coming. So with that, again, thank you so much for your time and input. We look forward to hearing more from you. Thanks.